But really, Ice Trap needs some, like, you gotta...
We're live, Tarke.
Hey guys, Tarke here, and today we're joined by Rory to talk everything to do with PoE2 and apparently every single league under the sun getting a buff. So Rory, if you just introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm lead designer on Path of Exile for Grinding Gear Games, and I work with all the designers and work with Chris and Mark and Eric and the leads on almost all the content that we make for the game. So, yeah.
How does it feel to finally have that trailer out there? I'm sure you were kind of a bit for a while.
Yeah, it's petrifying. I mean, 2 months ago, it's sort of how can we make the best possible league? What's the best, most elegant, concentrated design? And now, in the past few hours, it's like I just hope everyone likes me. Just what can I do to make everyone like me? So it's good having it out there now and can breathe. But yeah.
Well.
All right. Well, what I think we should do just to do a quick round table. If we just do our PoE2 thoughts, then we'll after do Ultimatum thoughts, and then we'll just harass Rory for 3 hours. Nugi, what was your reaction to the PoE2 stuff?
It looks amazing. Permanent health bars and really cool new weapons. I think that was my initial reaction. I mean, I can go on.
Yeah, you can. You can.
I don't know. This everything looks cool. The fighting looks cool. I don't know. We had some new monsters running around doing stuff. So yeah. I mean, if we can get that kind of combat, that would be really exciting to get a little bit more than just click the screen and everything dies, and have some interactive combat. But endgame does what endgame does. We'll see.
What about you, Octavian?
I'm really glad to see new weapon types and to see a push towards a distinction between weapon types. What Chris said in the Q&A later about claws being able to be used as a pseudo unarmed setup now. More stuff in that direction would be great. Personally, I want to see more gladiatorial weapon types, but that's just me. I want to see people throwing weighted nets and having big old javelin-esque spears. And we've got the spears already, but a trident or something. But that's getting into some specifics that maybe we need to talk about the broader stuff. I'm also really
builds. Come on.
Dual shield builds. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yes, that would be fantastic. Bladed shields. There's a lot. There's a lot of room to explore. I mean, I spent hours and hours and hours as a kid just pouring through D&D manuals, looking at pictures and drawings of weapons and stuff. So that this is something I can geek out about for a very long time, but it's probably not the main thrust of the podcast. That said, I'm really glad to see more identity with skills tied to weapons.
Right.
It's a great way to balance the game too. I think overall it's very specific as opposed to the bow patch that we had now a while ago. I think this is much better in terms of addressing things. And then when it comes to Ultimatum, all I could think of overall was how I am really looking forward to be playing SSF and seeing an item that I could potentially maybe use one time in 2 months on a character that I'm kind of thinking about making, and then dying on it on one that I absolutely do not ever will need that item. That's going to be great. It's very much a Raiz thing to do. And I really appreciate that, by the way, Tarke. Typically, I'm the first one to get called out, but this time around, Nugi got put on the spot.
Yeah, I just like to keep people a bit,
Yeah, on the edge,
right.
yeah. Well,
uneasy.
I like that.
That's what I'm going for, yeah. Uncomfortable at best. What about you, Ziggy?
I'm super excited about spears and crossbows and more weapon distinction. I hope we do see more unique skills for the different weapons. A quick question for Rory. Are the spears one-handed, two-handed, or a combination?
They're one-handed, but you can't dual wield while using the spear. So there'll be advantages for having your offhand empty, and there'll be advantages for having, obviously advantages for having a shield. So the offensive playstyle is to have your offhand empty while using a spear.
Ah, wow. Okay. So one-handers that can function as a pseudo two-hander, or you can run a shield.
Pretty sure we did something like an inherent character bonus, similar to when you're dual wielding while you've got your offhand empty with the spear. But I cannot remember what it was because it was ages ago we decided on it. And I'm never sure if we got around to implementing it yet. Well, we only showed them with the shields this time.
That's a super interesting extra layer of detail. Another thing that I wanted to point out, I think people might have missed, was Act 2 showed the ability to pick different paths in the progression of the act, so you can take the caravan town to different areas. Now we've got like a little bit of that, like current act 2, where you can like go to different sides, but it seems like they're doing a little bit more non-linear act progression. And I think I asked privately about that, and they said that there might be some sort of level scaling. Maybe Rory, you know about that? There might be like level scaling options, so that if you like do things in a different sequence, they'll be able to set to your character level.
I think the area will be a bit different based on whether the enemy cart has already been through there or not, which affects the levels of the monsters and the difficulty there. So,
Okay, interesting stuff.
That's cool. To backtrack a tiny bit, would we ever get like versatile weapons? I know you've said a little bit like having bonuses, but I really do like the idea of like swapping from a one hand to then like double handing a sword to get that like extra beefy hit, kind of like stancing.
we've definitely talked a lot about improving this item swap system, like the second weapon set. That should be the thing that makes that sort of stuff feel a lot better. And once that system is a bit cleaner, then we can put more investment in actually making it. So you want to do that.
That's fun. For me, I think the main. Oh, go.
I was just gonna sort of go ahead, Nugi. You go ahead.
No, you go.
No.
Yeah. So
okay.
as I was saying, I think the main thing for me that I thought was really cool was the dynamic animation swaps. How like I don't know if it's based on like the last skill you use, but it seemed like you'd swap from like carrying the spear like a thrusting weapon to then like a throwing like a javelin and stuff.
Yeah.
That stuff's really
much more
interesting.
Natural animation stuff going on there. Same for like crossbow reloading. You reload in a different position based on what the last crossbow skill you used was, whether your crossbow's still up in the air.
I'm a piercing bolt. Incendiary bolt.
All right, Nikki, what was it you wanted to say?
Wait, I just got distracted by Ziggy saying that because I just started thinking about the Dread movie. Because when he mentioned it on the bit, I was like, "Oh, that makes so much sense. That is so funny." Yeah, I recently watched it again.
We made sure we got dialogue recorded for every one of the Judge crossbow bolts. So
Nice.
When it comes to having voice lines, stuff like that, I imagine obviously that's a little easier when you're bringing new voice actors. But you don't have the worry that maybe if you suddenly want to introduce a new suite of skills, you're gonna have to bring back like the voice actor for every class, or.
Well, in this particular case, we recorded 50 different crossbow bolt names just in case we can then pick between them later on. Whenever we do stuff. In a way, it's easier for naming. Usually, for skill development, naming the skill is the hardest part. So now at least we've got a smaller list to pick from. That's the one
Hold
where
on.
every developer in the company gets involved in the name. It just doesn't feel quite right. So.
That is a very quotable thing you just said, Rory. I hope you don't regret those words.
Interesting. Right. Okay. So before we get into like just harassing Rory, quick ultimatum wraparound. Go Ziggy.
Ultimatum, I really love the like risk reward aspect of it, and the like there's two separate distinct parts of it as well. Like you're risking stuff that you have yet to get in regular maps, and then in the itemized version of them, you're risking stuff you actually have put in your stash, which I think is much more impactful and scary because it's like I've had this in my stash and now I'm about to, slap this exalt in here and I might not get it back, or I might get twice as many back. So I love that. I love that change. I'm interested to see how it plays out with like the duration of these encounters. Actually, I kind of wanted to ask that to Chris. Maybe Rory knows, but how long does like a 10 or a 6 set of these encounters go for? Because Ritual was quite rewarding, but I eventually started to find that after like 3 to 4 weeks that it felt like everything took a little bit too long with it. So I started wanting to skip it at that point. I think that's when people started to want to skip them as well for that reason.
Because it's random how many sequences you get, the ones that are sort of 5 or 6 sequences are relatively quick. I mean, definitely shorter than doing 3 rituals in an area. I can guarantee that. There's different game modes. They're variable based on, so some of them are sort of a fixed time, and some of them are based on how well you're completing the objectives. So that stuff's pretty variable. Once it gets to sort of a 9-10 reward stage, that's when it can be a very long encounter, but then it's absolutely worth that time. And that's pretty rare. It's not very often that you're going to get to 8, 9, or 10 stages.
Are those the itemized ones that go that far?
No, these are the ones that you find in the world. The itemized
okay.
ones, their length is also based on their difficulty. So the relatively easy
Mhm.
ones that don't have a huge reward will be very quick to complete.
And there is
Um,
only one in the map as well, for people asking in the chat.
Yes. Yeah, there's only ever one altar.
That leads into something that I kind of wanted to. So, in the comparison to Ritual had a bunch of different types of rituals that could show up. Like the 3D art of the pillar or whatever in the middle would show you this is going to be a Vol ritual or this is going to be a cold ritual or whatever. Do the ultimatums, are they just all this is an ultimatum and it picks from all the different potential hazards equally, or is there different types of ultimatums that'll have different types of hazards?
There's 4 different encounter types you can come across. The most common ones are the kill all the monsters and survive for a certain time, but there's also ones for capturing certain points in the area, and another one for killing monsters while defending an altar, or defending the altar itself. So there's a bit of variety in what you come across. That's the sort of thing that's fixed. And then every wave has 3 random modifiers, which start to be based on the previous ones. So if you start off picking for example, the flaming skulls as your first tier mod, then future stages will allow you to upgrade that to make it way more challenging, or pick a different modifier. So it escalates, but it's mostly choice based. I'd say the thing that from playing this league, the thing that's most interesting about it is that you get quite invested in the difficulty modifiers. Like all the we're working towards making sure all the modifiers are quite challenging. So you really care about what you're picking there. It's the most invested I've been in actually thinking about the challenge itself, but it's all player choice driven there.
That was
Compared to
kind of a
something like-
big
sorry.
concern of mine, just thinking about that. How early do you think the average player is going to feel challenged while doing these? How many stages in? Just to avoid tedium, possibly in the first initial stages with somebody who just has a above average strong character, but having to do those early stages to get to the ladder, because there's 10 different stages, which is pretty large spectrum.
Yeah, the early stages are faster than the later stages, so it doesn't take long to build up the challenge. They get progressively longer, and for the capture one, you have to capture more points once you get to the later stages, and that kind of stuff.
Perfect.
I was going to ask quickly, so like, just so we get an idea of how many different kinds of challenges there are compared to something like Metamorph, like, are we talking like 10 different, 20 different, 50? Like, how big is the pool
Of the actual modifiers that you can get?
Yeah.
Roughly,
Roughly, you don't need to give like an exact, like there are 17, you know.
Something like 10 to 20 as you progress, but the more interesting parts come in the upgrading the individual ones. So it's not like even though there's 10 waves, you're not seeing 10 different modifiers. Well, you're not having 10 different modifiers. You're often upgrading them. And there are certain ones that only unlock if you've got another modifier active, that kind of thing.
So it's not the case if you'll have like the same choice every time. It should feel quite different between each one, would you say?
Yeah.
But then can you upgrade them 10 times over during a single encounter?
Each one has 3. Well, certain ones have 3 tiers, and a couple have 2 tiers, but some also have 1 tier. There's some ones that are not so much things running around doing stuff as modifying your character. Like there's one that can just reduce your recovery rate, which is a tough one that you probably don't want to pick if you can survive the other options. And then there's ones like your projectiles will fire in random directions, which can be amazing.
Wait, what?
You don't care about it, but sometimes it ruins your day. You think this will be fine. I can handle this, and then you're poor Cobra Lash.
I like that. I like that the fact that you always have 2 other options to pick from means you can put in some kind of weird and crazy stuff like that. Like you can't really justifiably do that as a common mechanic in something like Ritual. Like you couldn't have a ritual that just makes it so players' projectiles fire the wrong way, because that would break too many builds and make them feel awful in those rituals. Like you kind of experienced that with the foul rituals where they disabled move skills, and that had to be nerfed because it felt really bad. But you can put something like that into a mechanic where the player can choose to ignore it every time. Because if it really awfully detrimentally affects their build, they can just avoid it.
Do you not then also have the worry that it's sort of like a free mod for anyone who isn't a projectile build?
They're not super high weighted, so you won't see them every time. You're not going to end up with every single one getting a free mod, except in the rare occasion you get really lucky with it. So occasionally you might feel like you got a free one, but that should be a very rare occurrence.
So have you made sure that there is a variant of these crazy ones, so you're kind of hitting everyone somehow? Right, so there's one for projectiles, which is, it's very iconic for anyone who plays like a bow build or something. But if you just slam in the ground with big AoE, do you get some craziness then?
There's one that greatly shrinks your area of effect, which is a bit rough, but there are a few special ones. There's I mean,
Okay.
for example, there's one that if you use a flask, it removes any other active flask effects you have. So that is pretty rough. You're alive.
No, there's one you
Evil.
don't pick, is what you're
Eh?
saying. There's one you just don't pick.
Imagine if flask
Choose
worked
your
that way.
poison.
Oh god.
This is a trial, by the way, for future flasking.
It's a buff to that one keystone that, superpowers one flask or whatever.
Question. So for the players who, for whatever reason, have incredibly tightly timed flasks, say like at the exact same time, does it pick one at random? Like, how does it know which one to knock, or does it just knock them all out?
There is always an order to things. There's
Right,
no
okay.
such thing as a simultaneous event in our game, I'm pretty sure. So
Mm.
it may be whichever key press reaches the server information first or something like that.
Certainly no
Sure.
human
Yeah.
fingers could press all buttons simultaneously.
Here we go. Well, someone's getting banned. Wow.
Yeah, so Octavia, what was your thoughts on Ultimatum?
What? Oh. I mean, we've touched on a few of them. I'm glad Ziggy brought up his concern earlier about ritual taking too long per zone, because I was a little worried about that as well. So good. This looks like a sort of more concentrated ritual in that way as well. And as someone who's been playing more hardcore of late, I'm glad you're not locked in the arena, and I'm glad you have the little window of 5 seconds where you can hop out and back in. I honestly think that's going to lead to more high tension moments than it would if you were just purely locked in there, because maybe you go for this really cool reward, there's like an exalt or something like that, a 6-link base you really need, and you end up hopping out because it gets too bad, but you want to get back in there because you want to be able to get the thing, and then you have to hop out again, and that's a lot more fun than just, this is a hard barrier, you're not allowed to pass it.
Put a very big red warning on your screen when it happens, so you feel the tension. Yeah.
Is it? Can you reset it? That warning? So when you go out, is it 5 seconds overall, or can you keep going out?
It resets back to 5 seconds. We might have to have something in there to start, but monsters will follow you out a little bit out of the circle.
Yeah.
And effects taking place a little bit outside the circle. So, yeah.
So, since each player has their own reward track, I assume that means that if you're playing in a 2 or more person party and someone steps outside of the circle, their reward is lost, but yours is still maintained if you stayed in the circle.
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
good.
Is there any? Oh, sorry.
Just from a difficulty point of view, are we trying to target pretty much everybody? Because Ritual is a little bit notorious for being very accessible for everybody. Everybody was able to finish most encounters anyway on the average build, outside of possibly the Chaos one. How difficult are we expecting the 10-stage encounters to really be for the average character?
It's actually going to depend quite a lot on the modifiers you pick and how well your build can handle the various modifiers and what encounter type it is that you're going up against this time. So there'll be some times where a average player will be like, I'm reaching my breaking point, I can't go any further, and there will ideally be some rare cases where a very well-built character doing get content they can easily handle still feels like maybe it's a bit too risky to keep going. But it really is a lot of the rewards are, once you get to 4 waves, you're always getting some currency out of it, so it's just a safe bet to leave there if and you'll still get some rewards out of the league.
Is there a difference? Is there a difference between the tier of map? Or can you just spam the low tier?
The rewards definitely there's higher tier. I think maybe the 10th one only turns up at a certain tier of map, the 10th wave. So higher tier maps are the only way to get the very best rewards.
Nice.
And they have better reward pool weightings as well.
Good. I was going to ask, is there anything to help normalize it in certain layouts? Because obviously, if you're in a cells or something, have you thought about that side of it at all?
There is some stuff to prevent you cheesing the survival one by hiding in a corner in cells.
Right.
But the different game it does affect the gameplay. The different game modes are affected differently. Like survival is a lot easier in a closed off area, while the wiping out monsters is a lot easier in the open up area. So it's quite variable with the encounters. It's not going to feel like it's the same in both areas.
Just a small clarification. Are the monsters summoned by the ultimatum locked within the circle, or can they step out of it to chase you as well?
They can step out to chase you a short distance, but if they run off by themselves, they'll decide to walk back to the circle.
Okay.
And if you find a place to hide from the monsters, there's a fallback thing where they'll teleport to you as well. So you'll never be lost looking for that last monster. It will always come to you if you...
I love that. Yes.
So, do you worry maybe that you might have a situation where if it's like super rewarding that people will be running like only blue maps or something? Because obviously this will be quite dependent on the map mods you have.
It's possible, but there's so many rewards in the game now that are dependent on getting good maps. So you're probably... I can't imagine that it's worthwhile to do that unless you're really just trying to get the 10th wave to proc for the challenge or specific reward from that. So
That's fair.
One concern players might have could be a repeat of Legion, where Aura bots and Headhunter become the best way to basically beat the content and get super rich from that by buying up all the, people buy up the 5 ways and run them, and it was always the most rewarding thing. And if you didn't have these super Aura bots or Headhunter, you couldn't really justify buying them.
The challenges aren't so extreme that every single wave 10 will require you having that kind of level of gear. The itemized trials, definitely the rarest of the very hardest of the itemized trials, is something for the people that have perfected their gear and just want to make huge amounts of currency. But those are relatively rare compared to the ones that are just more standard currency doubling.
I guess they're pass fail as well, whereas Legion was like a scaling thing. Like the higher your character performance, the more rewarding it was, which is what screwed the economy of it. This is you either get the reward or you don't.
Yeah.
The itemized ultimatums. What were they called again?
Inscribed ultimatums?
Yeah, the inscribed ones. Those come, they're just a random drop during Ultimatum League? Okay, so they don't specifically come from ultimatums and maps or anything like that.
No, it's any map, and they're more common the higher tier map you are.
Oh, neat.
I guess one thing which is quite good about those as well is if they're giving you mostly a set reward, it kind of stops the economy getting too messed up. Because obviously with Legion, there was like super like high roll aspect of it, of like you had to be able to clear it fast enough to get the loot. Whereas if this is a guarantee of like 5 exalts, you can't ever sell that for like 6 because it wouldn't make sense, right?
We'll see if there's a challenge.
Well, yeah, I guess if there's like some really obnoxious like clear 10,000 for challenges.
Don't tell me how to live, Tarke.
So obviously Ultimatum's got like a really heavy Val focus. Do you find it like easier or harder to revisit old ideas because you kind of have confinements you have to work within?
It is, I mean, it's really the art team that are the ones that sort of go to the next level. I mean, we've got a lot of... The Val are a very common thing to come back to because they've got a very Path of Exile sort of skill set of a lot of sacrifice and a lot of blood and things. So, like, it works well. It just makes sense that, we need something to attach a chain to. Okay, let's get a giant beating heart. That seems like something that the Val would have. So that's... It's sort of designed itself.
Did you start with like we want to do some more Val stuff, or did you start with the idea of Ultimatum and then linked it to Val afterwards?
I think it was actually Mark and Chris Neon and Chris that came up with the concept in the first place, and I think the Val thing just fit perfectly with the risk reward thing. We may have even had the Trial Master model ready to go, and like this guy see that concept art perfect for this league. Guy with a giant chaos orb for a face.
Love it.
So with that, obviously, we're seeing this like big focus on these blood theme skills. Do you have any favorites from the bunch, and how do you see these fitting, especially like the new low life stuff? How do you see that fitting into like existing builds and archetypes?
Yeah, the petrified blood one is the one where you're mitigating, well, delaying damage while under life is a really crazy thing. I was very scared of the idea of it because like this is gonna change so many things and open up so many new options. But it is really cool when it's opening up all sorts of new possibilities that I'm really just curious to see what people come up with for it because there's going to be some crazy combinations. And the fact that low life is now 50% makes a big difference for it actually just making items in future where caring about being on 50% life is something a life character can care about a lot more.
That must get weird really quickly, the causing players to take like a portion of damage as dot. Because like previously, I don't believe that like say a fizz take and his fire effect would be effective against a fizz dot, for instance, because I believe that only applies to hits.
This is only applying to hits as well.
Okay,
So
okay.
dots
That simplifies things
for the character. Yeah.
Can you kind of die with it and then stay alive, where it shows as if you fully depleted your life, but then your regeneration like kicks in before it kicks in?
You can definitely see your entire life bar is filled up with the petrified blood visual where you're like, oh, I do nothing, I'm dead. So
that would
What
make
if you log
builds,
out
like,
with then?
then you survive. So, yeah.
Got it. Checkmate.
Haha.
I mean, you can flask as well, so it's fine.
I would be really worried about nasty dots playing a build like that. You effectively just cut your health pool versus them. That's really
I'd be
scary.
very worried having all your flasks turn off mod playing a build like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are there any other? Oh, one thing that I was curious about. So the corrupting blood skill, how exact does that like scale infinitely? Does that cap out? Like, how does that work?
So corrupted blood is now 10 stacks, both on monsters and for players using it with the skill. So it's a little bit nicer for players where you don't get the huge damage burst if it gets the ridiculous number of stacks and you don't notice. But it is sort of it's capping at 10, and the damage is based on the gem level and the supports that you apply to it, or apply to the buff itself. So it's got quite a unique way of scaling, but it is sort of hit an enemy 10 times and maintain those hits to keep it at full strength.
Is it like aligned closely with bleed, or is it effectively a separate mechanic for things that specify bleeds?
There's a couple of things that we switched to applying to physical damage over time instead of just restricting them to bleeding, and a couple of new passives that work for physical damage over time multiplier, some item modifier stuff as well. So there's overlap, and it's definitely a good option. Like there's a build there for doing it with Crimson Darts applying the 8 bleed stacks. So there's some interesting things you can do there.
That makes sense together too.
And
Seems
it's not
pretty
like
extreme, hard to
exclusive
balance.
with bleed, right? So like it'd be bleed plus this new thing if you wanted to.
Yes. It means that, I mean, a lot of the most powerful bleed things are still bleed specific. So you kind of got to, you're not taking the perfect bleed choices if you're going for this. You're kind of finding the points where both things apply. Yeah.
Kind of difficult to think of a situation where Crimson Dance isn't OP though, honestly. Maybe there's like you kind of have to combine it, no?
I think there's certain bleed specific mechanics that will make it so that there are advantages, but it's definitely a buff to the best potential fizz dot build, basically. Yeah.
We've kind of jumped around a bit. We kind of like skipped straight into. Is there any other like specific ultimatum skill questions people want to ask before we like ask Rory to actually like sell ultimatum to us, kind of thing?
I don't know if it counts as an ultimatum skill specific question. It's about the vol skills.
So skills and ultimatum,
yeah. Chris mentioned, and he was told not to overhype it too much, so I'm not trying to get too excited here, but Chris mentioned that the majority of the changes to the vol skills are going to be reducing soul cost and upping damage. Are there any balance sweeps coming through that might address some of the lack of overlap with like support gems between the vol variant of a skill and a regular one? Like the redheaded stepchild of vol skills is vol lightning strike, because with regular lightning strike, you want to use like what multi-strike, and there's one other. There's like 2 support gems that are pretty core to lightning strike that do literally nothing for Vol lightning strikes. You end up with your Vol skill and a 4-link, which
I love you, Octavian.
awful.
It's like Ancestral Call, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
that's the other one.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's really the thing is the damage should go up a bit to compensate for the fact that you're not getting the optimal stuff of using them both. But there's
Okay.
also a couple of new unique items and things like that that could help out those specific cases as well, which I don't want to spoil, but yeah.
I
there's
mean, you
some-
can. We won't.
I don't know what I'm allowed to spoil.
All of it.
Everything.
All
You
of
have
it.
our permission.
Okay, after, yeah, there's a unique item from Itzuri that is almost made for those kind of specific cases.
Okay.
Oh.
I'm in trouble. Oh no, no, I'm fine.
Look at us.
So-
What's the red dot on your forehead? What's going on there?
No.
So it is a tricky case of it would be nice if we could somehow find a way for those things to apply. There's one thing that isn't actually done yet, so I'm not 100% sure it's going to get in time for Vile Ground Slam that we're hoping to do. That is kind of one of those examples of letting a mechanic that shouldn't apply to Vile skills apply to Vile skills, but I definitely won't say because it might just be like, nah, it didn't work. Sorry, programmers tried it and it failed. So yeah,
Fair
I'll
enough.
just tease that.
What are like the limitations of trying to revamp Val skills when you know that your entire skill gem system is about to radically change in the future?
It's kind of a we've got to ignore it, but then there's also well, this problem isn't worth solving because it will solve itself when
Okay.
PoE2 comes out. So we definitely don't want to half-ass the changes, whole ass or no ass at all. So we trying to focus on doing what's needed to make it so it works. But it's sometimes where we know that there's some core system change that's going to have to. It's absolutely mandatory. Also, just like there's 1 week of development left. We've been tweaking this thing for 2 months, and we still feel like there's something to be done. It just has to come later.
That's fair.
So what you're saying is that all the mechanics getting revamped right now are for sure going to be in PoE2 and not, in fact, getting removed like Beyond.
There's some things where it's just too much to think about every single thing and how it's going to fit in. We'll burn that bridge when we come to it.
My favorite mini game, you might enjoy this, Rory, is I have a few of the programmers on Twitter and I just ask them how the gem conversion's going, and they always get really happy. Maybe you should try that next time you walk past their desks. Have you guys worked out how that's going to work?
There's a plan, but it's gonna be messy. With we came up with a thing, and we're like, should we do it now just for this sorting out one particular change? It's like, nah, it's gonna be too much to do just for. It's gonna have to be some horrible nightmare for the programmers. Yeah.
To take you off of the PoE2 spoiler bubble a little bit, if you could give like the ultimatum sales pitch, what would be the main thing that you think players should be excited about for the upcoming league?
Honestly, the thing that happens when you get to the 10th wave is really cool, and I can't
Oh, there's a thing.
tell you what it is. But it's pretty exciting, and let's just say that every choice you've made on the modifiers on that encounter up to that point, you will really feel at that point. So
Oh,
to get to that stuff, it makes all the like difficulty modifier choices you have that much more interesting. So yeah, I just really like it when you just pick a modifier and then you regret your choices in a horrible way. So,
You get 1 flask charge. Use it wisely.
How about for like the non-ultimatum stuff coming in 3.14? Is there anything from that really stands out to you as like your favorite of the changed features?
I'm honestly excited to just play around with some more Vile skills because I like the whole thing of having the epic ability that you drop down for massive damage is cool, and it's nice that there's more builds that have that as a like, hey, here's a reason to play Flame Blast over another Ignite skill, is that I get to do the Vile Flame Blast thing.
Don't do this to me, Rory. Don't give me hope.
It has been buffed. I hope it's by enough. We'll see. I think it's pretty solid.
is it the plan to
Nice.
to have it more to have it more of a viable thing during bossing, to use Vaal skills as like part of
yes.
your.
Yeah, the current number is doubling the number of souls you get from a boss, and there's unique jewels and so on that are also going to help you out with that stuff. So we don't want there to be an easy thing where everyone is just fully sustaining, spamming only Vaal skills.
No.
They should be there as the epic button you press, that and have some small build cost, but not like ruin your build just so that you can use a Vaal skill to clear trash.
When you're like buffing Vaal skills, have you done anything to try and account for that thing where everyone just ends up running like Vaal Righteous Fire or like the de facto like Vaal Grace or something?
I mean, we nerfed Vaal Righteous Fire a little bit, but well, the spell damage bonus part of it. But so that's sort of, but it is also, yeah, we're just trying to make sure that if your build would take advantage of a Vaal skill, or has a Vaal skill that fits well with it, then that is a good option. That's a very chunky damage output there.
That's fair. Since there does seem to be a focus more on like the damage side of things, like obviously there might be some slight nerfs, but has there been any consideration for stuff like Vaal Molten Shell or Vaal Grace? Like, kind of in the developer's mind, what do you want Vaal skills? Like, what's the best case? Like, how should players be using them? Sort of thing.
I mean, we avoided nerfing the sort of aura buff style Vaal skills. I mean, we're doing a patch about improving Vaal skills. We don't want it to just be 50% nerfs to the things that people are currently enjoying. So it's really that we're trying to sort of have these things be competitive with them, but both are still valid choices. Well, ideally, both are still valid choices. Yeah. That's
fair. We touched a little bit on the difficulty side of things, and it's clear that you're trying to like push it more into the red maps, so you get like that 10th wave. But for like the campaign and the early maps, how would you compare the difficulty of Ultimatum to something like Delirium or previous League mechanics?
Definitely not as challenging as Delirium can be when you get to the higher depths. It really is sometimes you're just going to have a nice relaxing ultimatum and you get some rewards from it. It's not every single fight is a bare knuckle fight for survival, but those encounters will come, and you will have a lot more warning when they do come because you're the one that chose to make it harder, chose to keep going.
How exactly does the because it seems like there's like a time slow or like a pause where there are mobs still around you when you make the choice? How does that work?
That is just every time the wave switches, the whole instance stops. So if you've got a party member far away, they'll be paused. But if you're in a party, there is a limited amount of time that can happen for, so someone can't AFK and leave you stuck there forever. But so you've got, if you're solo, you've got as much time as you need to pick the options. In a party, there's a timer, and then the timer gets a lot shorter once someone's picked something. So you can see your party members' choices as well. So you know someone's locked in an option and the timer is ticking down. So once you recognize all the icons, like the same icon always means the same modifier. So you see the sort of totem-looking object, you're like, that's what I'm going for. It's only like 2 seconds to pick time stop, pick the modifier, and time resumes. We had it as a longer time stop with more epic effects, but we did what we would have done in a week after release anyway and shortened it right down. So it's quite a snappy time stop thing now.
So I guess it probably is like the same tech you used when like Shaper used to come into maps. Is that sort of...
Yes.
Right, okay.
We've just improved it a little bit to handle nicely if a player joins the instance and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
That's really good. The thought of the mob still moving and you being held in one spot was not appealing at all.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about, since we've got quite a few hardcore players here, what are your guys' like main fear about playing in the league?
As in, what am I afraid of dying to?
No, this is more for like Raiz, Nugiyen, and Octavian. Like, what is the main thing that they're worried will happen to their characters, and then you can be like, that will happen, or no, you'll be fine, sort of thing.
My own stupidity. I already said it. It was the thing where I just want an item that I'm never gonna use. It's gonna lay in my stash, and I'm just gonna die for it. Yeah.
Stacking auras, like high style, or Legion. I think that's my
as in
biggest
mob
concern.
stacking auras.
Yeah. That is always a concern with this kind of stuff.
Is it just completely random? It just can spawn any auras that it wants, and
I think there's one modifier that's disabled entirely because it breaks some mechanics with it, but we're doing something with Cannot Die, which we're still experimenting with and playing around with just to see how we want it to interact with this league and potentially affect other stuff as well. But it's not decided on, and it's not a thing we just want to take away a core mechanic. Ideally, it's just changed in a way that fits the encounter style better.
Is the disabled modifier proximity shield?
It might be the one that raises everything up as specters, just because raising dead ultimatum monsters is specters. I mean, saying that all ultimatum monsters will be spectrable, with setting the rares so they can spectre them. So there's some new stuff to play around with specters, but monsters won't be able to spectre themselves. So yeah.
A suggestion for a quick solution for the Cannot Die would be to entirely remove it from the game. Just saying.
That sounds like the easy way out. For you guys,
Sometimes it's a good way out.
Allies can die.
just preventing it bricking the encounter.
I was actually going to ask about that because you do have a history with like certain problematic mods and GG being very firm about like, no, we want to protect it for the integrity of the game or sort of stuff. Where do you draw the line between this is something that we like and we want to protect and okay, no, this is a real problem, this has to go?
It's different for different developers. So yeah, I think Chris and Neon and myself all have slightly different stances on that. Kind of the same thing of we've kind of agreed that we want to keep everything that is a challenge in the game there, just prevent it actually creating problems. Performances, and a good example of a problem that Cannot Die can bring up that we want to find a solution to the performance problem and the encounters being unable to be progressed problem rather than full on removing it from as a thing that can add challenge to the game. It should be a thing that can add challenge to the game, not a thing that ruins the game.
This is more of a specific balance question. I didn't really want to get into this, but I will. How do you feel about explodey chest? Because I feel like explodey chest is kind of just a thing that has existed, and yeah.
There's a sector in the upcoming Balance Manifesto to talk about what we're doing with that stuff. But I'll save it for the Balance Manifesto. So
That's fair.
it's there alongside all the other nerfs.
It's getting buffed. Poggers.
We kind of like I was expecting us to spend the entire time talking about Path of Exile 2, but we end up going like full in Ultimatum. Do you guys have more Ultimatum kind of stuff? Because we've got a weird topic list. We've got like Ultimatum, then we've got all the side not Ultimatum but coming in Ultimatum, then we've got all the PoE2 stuff to talk
So
about.
pure ultimatum.
Yes.
Just not side, what's also coming in the league stuff.
Well, I got a question, I guess. With everything changing when it comes to old mechanics and their rewards being more accessible through actually doing that mechanic, how much of the other rewards from other mechanics can we expect in Ultimatum? As with Ritual and many mechanics recently, I mean, the primary way of getting many items was through the new league mechanic.
Yeah, we've moved a lot of the very best rewards from leagues that have league-specific rewards back to those leagues. Things that where you could just get the very best oils from anything, made it kind of feel cheap. So they're back where they belong, really. So this league will have a similar reward pool of there'll be oils in it, there'll be catalysts. They just won't be the rarest oils and the new catalysts.
Okay.
One very specific question that I had, but it makes sense because you've introduced this new veiled currency. So there seems to be this emphasis on trying to get people to kind of like fish for like the ultimate like veiled rare. When it comes to something like adding veil from like tier 4 ailing or something, will you get the same mod over and over again like you currently do, or could you like spam add and get different prefixes, if that makes sense?
I seem to recall we did something for that, but I can't remember exactly what it was. I think there was something done so it is more random, but I wouldn't put my money on it. I can't remember the specifics of how it ended up working.
Yeah, that's right. It was a very specific question that guy asked. I thought, that's a good question, but it is very specific.
It was one of the 3 questions that I wrote down. God damn it.
I'm pretty sure we changed the generation to be based on some ID, mod ID, rather than the item ID. So I think so, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, it should be that you can use a Veiled Chaos Orb on a weapon repeatedly until you get the Chaos Dot multi one. You can keep attempting it.
So does that also mean you can't? I don't know if the unveiling system, the way we used it now, if you wanted a specific one where you would keep unveiling the same mod, so that would not keep happening anymore. So you would basically negate that for people who are trying to. But I don't know if I missed something in terms of the whole unveiling system, in terms of like how easy it is to do now. But that was a thing people did before. I must have missed something. I don't know.
I am pretty sure that you will get a different set of veiled mods on the same item if you apply a new veiled mod to it and reveil it and things like that. So it is a sort of, you just need one weapon and spam it with veiled chaos orbs if you're after a specific craft.
Like trigger mod, which is a common one. Right, okay.
So that would probably also affect Ashling research with re-adding and
Yeah.
Without getting too crazy into specifics, has the like syndicate specific things like minus mana cost been adjusted for that? Because it could then make getting that craft really difficult if you couldn't like force it, so to speak.
You couldn't do that before.
You can't, yeah.
That is a master specific. The way you do that is that you put that master in the front of research or intervention, and you keep getting the same master again and again.
There are a couple of things, like for example, one of the Iceling rewards is you get to pick one of the other master's items with that master's mod on it. So if you're after a very specific craft, there's a syndicate option for that as well.
Okay, I gotta ask it. When it comes to the Katarina thing, you've seen such a massive buff. So many things change, trying to reward it in so many different ways. Why not just make it that it doesn't reset the board?
It really is the core design principle of the mechanic. And also, you don't lose as much as I think you lose when you reset the board. Like, for example, it doesn't matter if someone has more than one friend connections. It doesn't increase the number of allies, the chance of allies coming in. As long as someone's got, they're friendly with one other person, then now they have a chance for another person to come in. So having every single person attached to every other person is really like, there's a specific outcome. And that's the thing, if that's really what you want to do, you can still do that. It's now potentially just not the only way to get certain rewards in the most sustained way. Especially seeing as the tier 4 one is basically doubling the rewards of just about any master.
I think part of that is also that you lose the ranks. So it takes a lot longer to then generate some of the safe houses. So if you have, say, a full 3-rank safe house, retaining some of the ranks could be a way at least.
To be fair, we don't know what the passive tree nodes on the Atlas are going to be like next league, but this league there's a good number of generally.
Oh, it's definitely easier.
Yeah, like it is a lot easier to reinstate higher ranked characters.
Yeah.
It was like I tested it for a while this league, and in hardcore trade, which is a very different market, so take it with a grain of salt, it was like on the edge of being worth farming Katarinas as quickly as I could. So yeah, I guess the new system it would probably end up being worth.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, I can't remember the specifics, but I'm pretty sure we didn't nerf any of the syndicate passives, and one of them that gave safe house experience I think was buffed a tiny bit. So, and yeah, that, I mean, my personal experience is that leveling up guys in the correct zones was pretty quick. So it should be now even more worthwhile to be doing that.
I don't want to get into like specific things like did you buff Valdos or nerf this, but like should we expect much of a shake-up when it comes to the Atlas passives next league?
There's a little bit of a shake-up. We actually like switched a couple of nodes round and where they were in the tree to fit. Like, so they've got a stronger theme to like, this Legion one is themed differently from the other ones, and there's definitely some particularly rewarding strategies that are being cut down, replaced. There's ideally we're trying to keep everything interesting, so there's some more interesting mechanics going on, but there's some things like, for example, the incursion one where monsters are all magic is now on the node that says that you get more time from killing monsters, so they sort of work together, and it's good for both if you're struggling with incursion, but also just adds more reward to the incursion. So and the fact that ritual is now in there has meant we just shuffled around some things.
What was the like main challenge when it came to adding ritual? Like, did you design ritual knowing that you'd want to add passives for it? Was it like a difficult league to iterate in that sense?
We thought about thinking about it, but it was like, now let's focus on making ritual good as it is, and then we will come up with stuff. And we've come up with some interesting things that this is the best place to be doing rituals if you're wanting to use things. There's stuff like the blood-filled vessels now act as if they're a ritual scarab, and that they guarantee you ritual in that area when you run them.
Cool.
Oh.
The difference being that you can't get the ritual splinters in those ritual vessel created areas, so you can't infinitely farm them. But that is, it's now, well, those are quite much more useful because they are guaranteeing rituals.
This isn't a question we ask often since we have you here. Just how successful do you feel like Ritual was as a league, and just the introduction of all the Maven stuff generally?
Ritual did pretty well considering that it was a lot of the team's focus was on the Maven stuff and on Path of Exile 2 stuff. So it really achieved a lot considering the resources put into it. And in terms of the picking the reward thing is a great system. I think like being able to choose what you get makes the rewards feel more special, in the same way that I feel Ultimatum picking the modifier of difficulty makes the difficulty feel more special.
Yeah, that was the fun. Was there any lessons you learned from Ritual that went into Ultimatum? I'm guessing was we like picking things.
I mean, the biggest when I was like, okay, now this is what Ultimatum is. I'm like, how are we going to make this as difficult as different as possible from Ritual, because it feels like inherently fighting monsters in a circle. But so a lot of the focus of Ultimatum is make it feel different from Ritual, and rather than carrying over the things that Ritual did well, let Ritual be good at the things it did well.
Are there like key things in the actual combat in Ultimatum that you did to try and differentiate it from Ritual? Because you're picking the modifiers and all that, but like
the
I don't
monsters, or specifically the rare monsters in Ultimatum, are a lot tougher and have more special abilities that you want to care about a lot more. So in smaller scale combat is a bit more of a gameplay thing. There's more dodgeable stuff than a regular random map would have.
So
and
like,
the monsters are tougher than Ultimatum, than Ritual monsters.
are there Ritual specific monsters then? Because I don't think we had, or sorry, Ultimatum. We didn't have Ritual specific monsters. We have Ultimatum specific monsters.
All of the monsters are Ultimatum specific.
Oh, that's bad.
Valish constructs, or Valish warriors, or Valish apes.
Okay.
Things like that.
What, okay, ball monkeys. Sure.
I mean, in the trailer, there's lots of just strange little monkey men sort of running around.
Yeah.
Is it like a conscious design effort with these repeat of like small arenas, like we saw this kind of like with the Maven arena, then Ritual, and these small places, to try and like bridge the gap a bit between like the off-screen builds and the true melee, whatever that means?
It wasn't really a conscious decision. It was just trying to make it feel like its own kind of combat, and they just all ended up being, that wasn't the core factor, but the combat that we came up worked in the small contained arenas.
That's fine.
This
Also, since go on.
I have a really specific question because I visualized it when we were talking about small arenas and it made me laugh. So we saw in the trailer that you could pick Shrink the Arena. Is that one of the ones that stacks? Can you get 3 stacks of Shrink the Arena and have an arena the size of a quarter?
No, it doesn't stack, but it does require you having picked a modifier that adds some area control. You already have Poison Cloud or Runes before you can see that. So if you're just in a big open area with no area control threats, you won't be offered that. Only when the area is already constrained that it gets even smaller. But that is one of the rare examples of a modifier that can make the encounter a bit faster or a bit easier to do for corpse explodey builds, that kind of stuff.
Blade explosion builds.
Yeah.
To backtrack a tiny bit back to the Maven thing, since Maven kind of tried to push a bit with the kind of mechanics that PoE adds to the game, since I don't think any dev has spoken about this, like, how well do you think the memory mechanic went down with the player base? Because that was something that a lot of people kind of like, this shouldn't be in my ARPG, or some people like, oh, this is really fun,
Memory is hard.
Particular mechanic?
The memory game on Maven where you have to like follow the floor pattern around and stuff.
I wasn't directly involved in the boss fight, so I haven't thought about it too much. So
It's fine. You can just throw someone else under the bus.
Solid dodge.
It's honestly a thing that I've thought of putting in boss fights before. So I haven't played against it, and I didn't get to the Maven this league, sadly. So once I play against it, I'll give you my actual thoughts on it. Once I get a good chance to test
Oh,
it.
didn't know you could get 100% dodge. No, well, impressive. Okay,
That's pretty good. Does anyone have any more like Ultimatum or 3.14 questions where you bounce back to PoE2 stuff?
One last small specific thing is in a softcore setting, the map variants or the itemized variants of the ultimatums, are those just one shot, you fail, you're done? Because you have 6 portals. Can you keep going back in if you die, or if you die, is it just over?
You can't go back in once you die. Once the encounter begins, the portal will close. So it's a lot like the ultimatum itself, where if you die, that's the ultimatum failed.
Makes sense.
You'll still get the random drops from the monsters. You
Cool.
just will lose your special
Right.
item.
I have a quick question, but I don't know if you know about the corrupted helmet that you can corrupt multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
So that can corrupt into different helmets. Does that mean you can get like multiple implicit corrupted and then corrupted into a different helmet, like a different unique helmet?
I don't know if you can get multiple implicits with it, but you have the special implicit on it. You can reroll it because it's got this unique pool of implicits. So you can get an implicit that you want and then get really lucky and corrupt it into the perfect helmet for that.
So it's more like you can keep corrupting it until you get desired outcome rather than adding multiple implicits.
Or it bricks in the more likely case, but yes.
But it should still be possible then to get one
Yes.
corrupted implicit and then change it into another unique helmet with that
Yes.
as well. Okay, interesting. It's a pretty interesting item.
It's
I like that one.
it's a fun item to play around. We just
Yeah.
like some of the other developers hadn't seen it, so I just brought it up, and they're like, "Let's just file it a few times." Okay, let's do another one. That was fun. Okay, let's do another one.
Well, I love the gloves. I think that's always fun finding those and
Yeah,
covering them. So I think it's a cool design space to have items like that.
All right. Well, I finally built up the courage to ask this question as a Diablo 3 main. How viable is it to only run around and open chests and not kill mobs ever now that that system is revamped?
Which chests are you thinking of getting all the loot you need from?
Just the white ones. I saw Orb of Binding. Can you scale that?
Or just estuary map meta?
Yeah.
I'd say do the testing. You get back to me. Spend a league doing just that, and we'll see where we end up.
I'll do it too. I did it
feel
in
like that's-
Onslaught back when quantity worked on chests. It was good loot. It's good stuff.
I feel like Rory, if you were to request Slippery Jim to do like 100 million chest only maps, he'd do it.
We could
He
technically
probably would enjoy doing it, but
we could technically automate it and do it ourselves and find out the results.
Oh,
But it's
that's
more
less
fun for
fun.
you to do it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so I guess PV2 stuff. So obviously with the spears and the crossbows, it seems like you're trying to like push the specific weapons have a specific feel when it comes to the skill stuff.
Yep.
How much of a challenge is that when you've got all the pre-existing like maces, axes, and everything in the game?
All of those things we feel like we're going to make significant changes to make them all feel unique. They have, the implicit effect of them being quite different from like having a mechanic that maces have a mechanic that only maces can have, basically, rather than the current just a bit of stun reduction, is the general idea. And then you can have mace passives that actually affect the passive of the implicit of maces, that sort of stuff as well. And the other part of it is animation changes. The fact that we have the new PoE2 character rigs, where already the weapon types feel different because they move differently, and it means we can open up entirely new skill design that we just haven't had the animation capacity to do with the old character rigs, where we can actually have a movement skill for maces that feels like a movement skill made for maces, that sort of stuff.
Given that this design is being done with the use of implicits to accomplish it, are these implicits going to be taking up the same exact space as any other, and thus meaning that you would never want to vol one of these items? or double corrupt them, or are they just going to be, this is always on this item, you can vol it, it'll get something else?
It's a point of discussion. It is the voling item is a very sort of specialized thing that you don't need to do for everything. So my kind of thought is that it can be its own thing, and if you don't care about, I mean, it's an opportunity. If every weapon has an implicit, then vile weapon implicits should be better than they currently are, and almost opening up a new mechanic in that regard. So, but it's we've still got to go through every single weapon type before we even decide what this results.
Yeah, it's pretty far out there.
Have an implicit. Maybe it will be some other mechanic that can't work as an implicit. But for example, crossbows are 100% reliant on that skill being there. Without it, you don't know crossbows.
Yeah.
So,
You could get a vol version of the skill on a random chance on corrupting it.
we kind of want to avoid the thing of every item has 4 different implicits and 2 different types of sockets and all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah, that's fair.
You could remove it if it's a good base damage on the weapon, but it has a bad implicit for a certain build.
yeah,
If that makes
a lot
sense. I mean,
well, yeah, if the effect is one you don't care about, then that's probably a reason that we don't need to have it. So it's always locked in. You don't always need to invest in whatever the dagger's special effect is.
Do crossbows
What? No, I just really liked how you specifically said 4 implicits, Rory, considering there's synthesized items in the game. It's like 3, that's fine. 4.
There's definitely a time during development where we're just like, let's just add another line on the item. Add another one.
Nice.
My question was about crossbows. Are they not able to use regular bow skills then, since they?
The current plan is no, they have their entirely own skill set. I mean, we're doing a lot more of the focusing down gems to specific weapon types. There'll be certain ones that will always be quite general, but yeah, crossbows are built alright. Well, currently the ammunition system only works on the crossbow specific skills, and their ammunition is designed to be balanced around those skills. So we could have ammunition apply to some of the bow skills, because, for example, the incendiary shot adds a flat amount of radius to the AoE of all of your things. So that would just be insane on some bow skills.
Just as more like just a philosophy kind of question. So one of like the early appeals of Path of Exile going way back was the idea of being super flexible, sword witch, you could do anything as anything. Then with Ascendancy, there was this concern that maybe the game would become too specialized. And since then, Ascendancies, if anything, have just become like more like this is this specific thing. Do you worry that with these super specific weapons which can only use these skills, with the new Ascendancies built around that maybe people could maybe feel too narrow in their choices? Or
I wouldn't say that these weapon implicits are going to be ascendancy focused in a major way.
Right, okay.
In fact, it might even be pushing some of the weapon restrictions away from some of the. Well, we already did the thing of like any block stuff works with the gladiator thing, not just the shield block. So it's opening up the stuff where we can. For example, this time, just as a small minor thing, the berserker, the crit node now isn't restricted to attacks. So just like little things that we can do to just open up that stuff where it makes sense for the theme. Like we don't want to corrupt the theme of the ascendancies, because the theme of the ascendancies is the most important part of them. Feeling like you're a fire wielding juggernaut should be the thing that. Oh, sorry, chieftain. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
So we shouldn't have to worry that
Berserker's
PoE2 will be the case of like, this is the crossbow ascendancy, you have to do that. This is the spear ascendancy, you have to do that.
Yeah. Where, I mean, there is things like, for example, we revealed the new, I can't even remember what we called it, tactician thing, has a
I remember there was the
rain of arrows style, or like connecting directly to that. But even in that stuff, it should be, there's plenty of other options that the build ascendancy isn't built entirely around rain of arrow things or totem things. There's a lot of use at least one of those mechanics probably.
Yeah, I do remember something from ExileCon which was like, this is like the were-cat ascendancy, and this is like the were-bear ascendancy and stuff. Like when it comes to the shape-shifting stuff, is that kind of like something slightly different, or?
That is a thing of then either you're taking advantage of the shapeshifting thing or the animal companion thing and the other nodes on that ascendancy. So if you don't want to shapeshift, but you want an animal companion, which is obviously a very popular dream for all of us to have a giant animal companion, then there'll be options for the ascendancy. I mean, every time we're updating ascendancies, we're adding more nodes so that there can be more flexibility in the things you can do with those builds.
You don't have to give us specifics, just as an idea, because I vividly remember right after the announcement, I spoke to Engineering Eternity, and he's like, I have no idea how they're going to make the 19 new ascendancies or something. Like, how many of those have you got, like, sort of locked in?
We've decided on general themes for 9 of them and
Right.
designed specifics for like various specifics for different ones. But the ascendancies are one of those things that we'll be going over in another PoE update later, where we can hopefully show off a few more of them.
Yeah, that's fair. So Ziggy and Chris spoke about this a little bit, about there is a sort of goal or an aim to maybe slow down aspects of PoE2 to make it feel a little bit more personal, at least in the early game. Difficulty also seems, especially for the demo we played, we do know that you said it was kind of like overtuned, but do you hope that PoE2 might become a more difficult game, or?
Definitely there's much more of a, similar to what Chris was mentioning on the Q&A, where it's not about bosses that have a degen aura around them that you're encountering. It's more that they're doing big charged up attacks that you can see coming and you can avoid. So putting equal parts skill and character builds as part of the difficulty, rather than just really focusing on character builds, as a lot of early PoE builds end up being. So more, and that also means giving the players, I mean, we need to slow down the player a little bit to give them the time to see the attacks coming. But it's also a thing of, now with better animations, we can have really fast attack speeds that look like a nice flowing series of attacks, rather than something moving so fast you're just seeing 1 or 2 frames of the animation.
Knowing that the player will always try and find the way of the least resistance, do you have concerns that with this design philosophy, and then also having the idea that, well, we should keep PoE open and you should always be able to achieve these crazy builds that are super fast, that it kind of contradicts each other? Because when you have these builds that either blow up the entire screen, run super fast, what ends up happening is that it skips all the cute little design things that you've made, all the charging up attacks. Like, so what's kind of your thought about keeping those two?
It's probably
check?
it really is that you will get a lot faster as you progress, but it's never
Yes.
going to be so fast that you don't interact with every mechanic. There'll be some mechanics that a very fast build ignores, and some mechanics that a very high damage build or a very tanky build ignores. That's kind of the perks of going that. But it shouldn't be that a character is insanely fast, very tanky, and huge AoE, and because of that, there's no mechanics they care about. It's nice that you can choose to bypass some things by what your build focuses
Of course.
on. It just shouldn't be to the point of absolute extremes.
On a similar note, just for you personally, how do you feel about the things where you see the random clips of someone literally like one-shotting the end game bosses of PoE?
There is a certain point of, there's so much progression that a character can have at the moment, where yes, after playing for 3 months solid and having all that currency bought into your stuff and managing the economy and things, it kind of feels like you already won the game a while ago, and now you're one-shotting the game. That's cool that you're doing that. That's kind of why we have the 3-month leagues, because that is an inevitable thing of character progression, while we have all these options for developing your character. If it's a thing where it requires almost no investment to do that, then it's going to be nerfed in 3 months, is what I usually think when I see those things happen.
That's fair. On the sort of like ideological thing, this is something that I mentioned on another PoE podcast recently, that currently in the game it's impossible to drop the best items because the best stats are tied behind specific inherent mechanics, be it Maven Orbs, Double Influence, now seeing it with Veiled mods.
Yeah.
Since it seems very clear that you want to ultimately rework loot, isn't having all these super like beyond tier 0 mods tied to specific mechanics, meaning that you can never really drop the best items in the game anymore?
This is definitely a big question of this item system thing, and we haven't had the full discussion that needs to be had before we can talk about that, but that is top of my mind when it comes to what we're doing with both the loot rework and future in-game system changes.
Is
Like, okay.
Could part of the solution be? So I'm a very big fan of Incursion, always have been, because of the specific mods that Incursion items have. So, and then now we also have stuff like Harvest. So the combining of different mechanics and say finding a few items with like double T0 mods become the goal in terms of dropping that item you need to then further craft on it using specific different tools within the toolkit, rather than finding like the sixth tier in one single drop, which is statistically impossible.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where ideally it is you find an item that is so good that you want to wear it right now, but it's not complete. There's still some more
Right.
doing it. I mean, even just putting quality and stuff like that is the most simple example. But yeah, that I can always imagine there will be that stuff. Or even just this item has 5 mods. It's worth craft. It's amazing. It's got 5 mods. Now I can just craft the thing that I want, and maybe it's not the best craft. I want a different craft later, or I want to YOLO bestiary exalt it to get something amazing.
It is a little frustrating having played the demo, because I didn't realize it would have been such a big deal. But so I was playing a ranger, and I'm just going through the Act 1, like, oh, this is fun, and a storm cloud dropped, and I just equipped it, and I didn't think about it, but I just equipped it, and I was playing, and then Chris was like, you just equipped that, and I'm like, oh god, I just equipped that, and ever since then I keep noticing it. Like when I was playing SF earlier, I had a spell crit life chest drop, and I'm like, this would be an amazing chest. I'm currently using a tabula, but it's never near good enough that I would invest on my 6 links into it.
Yeah,
because it's the whole economy is screwed. Obviously that's something that will eventually be fixed whenever PoE2 comes out. But when it comes to the loop system, and I know I'm really thinking on the spot here, but like, should players kind of just accept, okay, these big things won't come until PoE2, or should we expect some of these loot things, like more meaningful loot improvements, to come before then?
I mean, the socket thing is really the biggest thing. I mean, Ultimatum itself is giving better than average rares when you're getting them. There's different variations on how they're generated. Often they will have better sockets, like, so you're not as often going to have to reroll the sockets just to use gloves or boots just immediately. Obviously, not everything is going to be dropping 6 linked for the body armor and weapons, but it is like, that is, we're aware that the sockets are the biggest part of that, and being able to craft on whatever the item is missing is the other part, which is also why a lot of the Ultimatum items might come with 5 mods rather than 6, just so you have that space for crafting them. Yeah. But it is, in terms of the general gameplay, the skill gem system in PoE2, and there's a reason why we announced it first, and that was the most important thing. Like, that was the one thing that we wanted to do for PoE2. Everything else is like, whatever improvements we can make, but that's like needs to happen to solve the potentially the biggest problem that PoE1 has with picking up items off the ground.
How necessary and similar to trying to 6-link an item will Jeweler's Orbing be in PoE2 then?
We haven't really played around with the numbers there. Both the currency weighting will change, the chance of you getting the currency, and also how often you are getting just a 5-link or 6-link gem that dropping on the ground at high levels will be. I mean, there'll be, I can almost say there's certainly going to be a recipe to transfer your experience over to a 6-link fireball if you find a 6 fireball when you're using a 4-link, but yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I'm very sick of 6-linking items. I don't want to do it anymore. Looking forward to that. I've got a random question that I'll ask now, since there's not a good time to ask it otherwise. The petrified blood that caps your life mechanic, how does that work with leech? Does that mean you have endless leech effectively because you're not filling up your life globe with normal leech?
I'm pretty sure it does, but I'm not 100% sure, and who knows if it's going to change in the last minute because of the testing that we're able to do on alpha this week.
Pretty sure it does, like, keep your leech going effectively.
Yeah.
That's certainly a nice upside to it. I mean, it seems like a pretty reasonable, like, balancing point for capping out half your life.
Having always up leech really is the thing that saves you from degen with it. So
yeah. Yep.
technically, if you only have half as much life, then your leech is doubled, right? So
Hmm.
Because that, just to confirm, that is exactly how that works. Where that life still exists. It's
Yeah.
just it's not reserved or anything. Okay, yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, technically, you with flasks you can go above the 50% and then have a larger one-shot prediction than you otherwise would have. But then obviously you're not leeching that stuff up, so that's a lot of maintenance and
Mhm.
not getting low life benefits. Then
Was there some like reduced damage taken on low life sort of mechanics there to help with the one shot issue with having, 4K instead of 8K life or 3K instead of 6K?
so the petrified blood mitigates, or it delays 40% of the hit damage.
Right.
So it's not as much mitigation as you would have having full life, but there is something there that's softening those blows. Like quite a significant portion of your damage is mitigated that way.
Yeah, well, the power of healing in this game has always meant that a mechanic like that was pretty dangerous to add to the game, but now it's been added effectively because it's tied to this half-life mechanic, which seems like a way of potentially balancing it at least.
Hopefully, we'll soon find out.
Hmm.
When
Interesting.
it comes to defensive mechanics, just generally in Path of Exile, it tends to feel like when one defensive strategy becomes too popular, you'll be much quicker to destroy that than maybe like offensive stuff.
Yeah.
How do you feel just generally about the current state? And I'm sure Nugiyen, Octavian, Raiz probably feel more strongly or have more insight on this, when it's kind of like everything must either be fortify stacking to the extreme, or everything must always be this necro block glancing, like,
Oh, yeah, you go ahead.
I wanted to tag an addendum to that. I feel like that is a statement that can be made with the caveat that you're talking about either a solo self-found or otherwise restricted environment. So like, you're doing a league start, you're low budget, you're solo self-found, you're in a private league. I feel like with access to proper, like a decent economy and proper trade options, there are a lot more choices than that. But they are choices that are usually supported by things that are much more specific and not as easy to pick up.
I don't. If I could add to that real quick, I don't actually
this is
think
fine,
with
Rory. You're getting
Fortify-
time to think. He's preparing the dodge question.
Right.
I've never actually worked on Path of Exile. Ask the next developer.
I think that I don't think there is a choice when it comes to Fortify because everyone can get it. So everyone is basically forced to getting it at this point.
Yeah. So
All I have to
defenses
add.
are a big thing that we want to do a major pass on, but it is again a thing if we don't want to just nerf a couple of them, we want to do like this is what defenses, especially in PoE2, should be, that sort of big pass, and then obviously as soon as we've locked that in and decided it and done the work, because it does involve a lot of like what we're talking about involves a lot of changes. That is something that has to happen in one big swoop where defenses are now, how you build defenses is now more consistent. And I don't want to go into too much because that's for the podcast when that is announced in however many months' time.
That's fair. I guess it's a very dangerous thing to get wrong because for everyone who plays hardcore, if you're just like the game just isn't playable anymore, or I mean even just for people don't like losing XP in softcore, so they don't want to randomly.
I think there's a tendency as well, and a completely forgivable one, because you're playing, if you're talking about from a hardcore perspective, you're playing in an environment where if you screw up and fail, you just lost like 20 hours or 40 hours or 60 or however many on that character. So there's a tendency to trend towards the tools that are going to work. I think there's actually quite a lot of tools in the toolbox that with the right build and setup can work fairly well, but like why? Like why would you try?
Well,
And when
it's a
there's
trade-off, right? Because sometimes the game is in a state where the defenses haven't been rebalanced in a long time, and you don't need the sort of extreme of having max block and 12k life. You can get by having 5k life and some block or glancing block, and that's good enough for the average character. In that case, you can invest whatever you would have put into like the extreme option into potentially more damage, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is the recovery ties into this in a major way as well, and that ties into boss damage. Like they're all like connected factors that, again, we need to address all in one big go and see how that all shakes out. But that's a lot of discussion and development and things. So not this patch. I don't think we can get it done by this week, but
Hmm.
I'll let you know.
Balance must be inherently kind of impossible in this game when there are so many factors of what builds are people playing, what passives are they playing, then character skill, latency, all this other stuff. Do you not worry to some extent that this is just going to like implode in PoE2 when you just add all these extra new things, like doubling the amount of ascendancies, potentially different skill trees is this weird thing Chris kind of keeps hinting, like the PoE2 skill tree versus the PoE1 skill tree. Or...
I mean, I can tell you well, I don't know sure, but I'm pretty sure that we'd be doing a beta so that we have time to like get it in a good spot before we bring it into every aspect of the game, considering a lot of it, or some of it will have to carry over to PoE1 and some would be nice to keep different so that they feel like different games. So I mean, thinking about it is worrying. Yeah, no, but we got it. It's all under control. We can do it. It's gonna be great.
Is that overall the intent for them to be very different from each other? Because the initial impression that I got at ExileCon was kind of like, it's a different campaign, and then everything at the end game is just like, you play through this campaign if you want these ascendancies, you play through this one if you want these. But now it's starting to sound like you're making a pretty major decision by starting your character not just as a different ascendancy, but just going through the other campaign. It will impact your endgame decisions greatly with potentially, like a different skill tree and a whole lot of other things.
I mean, it's too early to say anything about the skill tree stuff and what that actually involves, but it's sort of, if the thing that we're doing for PoE2 is better, then it's going to be rolled on to PoE1. It really is sort of the rewards and how rewarding a boss fight is now that it's a tougher fight and how much longer each encounter will end up being. That's the sort of stuff that should be the deciding factor between PoE1 and PoE2. And ideally, we want people to be playing PoE2 mostly because that is the nicer looking, nicer feeling, more engaging combat, because it's just up to our modern standards for every aspect of it.
Won't you only be able to play PoE2 in leagues?
What was that, sorry?
Won't you only be able to play PoE2 in leagues? Like, you won't be able to play through the old campaign in challenge leagues, right? That's like only standard.
Don't remember.
I thought that was the case, at least.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'll we'll find out later, I guess. I'll find out when you guys find out.
I do have to say, I thank you for being such a good sport for this stuff, because a lot of this stuff kind of verges on, just give me your tax details and your mother's maiden name. It's a very fine line between like, what can't I say?
Just to confirm, I said things. I'm not a brand risk, chat. Okay, I said things.
I just wanted to talk about calling out crossbow skill ammo names as you do it for 2 hours.
That I will just say that was the funniest thing about seeing the trailer in advance, so I could prepare for it, is just knowing like Twitch chat as soon as firebolt, flaming bolt, armor piercing bolt, just knowing it was going to happen and just like watching it like no.
It was. I mean, as soon as I pitched the idea of doing the Judge Dredd gun as crossbow skills, then almost everyone was on board, except for the programmers were like, "That's not how support gems work. That's not a thing." But they made it work, so it all worked out in the end.
They can do anything if they put their minds to it.
I will say though, actually, I'm going to make a stand here. So when I pitched the Celestial Cat Soul Rend, I specifically requested that it meowed with each cast. And they were like, no, that'd be terrible. But now, like, if we can have flaming bolt spam, I think it's only fair.
It's not with every attack, though, Tarke. It's only when you swap.
But it
Come
should
on.
be.
I think we can, if we can have flaming bolt spam, we should get meow spam. Yeah.
I'll see what we can do.
When it comes to like the challenges of, you know, taking the baggage of a game that was, you know, started coded in a garage and the random like commit notes that you didn't think would stick around for that long, kind of what's been the biggest hurdle when it comes to PoE2 development? You keep kind of like, oh, there's this one thing that just keeps like tripping us up.
It really is the fact that there's so much stuff that we want to improve and are going to improve, and so many systems that need to be, well, just changed because of the PoE2 systems we've already decided. Just there's a long road ahead of us of all the changes that we want to make. So we want to do all of them. We want to improve every system that at least needs to be changed, and it's just thinking about all of them together is going to. Well, it's been a lot of fun. It's able to like do things that we can't normally do in a 3-month cycle, or even just without turning the whole game on its head. Now we can turn the whole game on its head and do some really cool things. But we also want to keep everything that made PoE1 good, like everything we possibly can. Like every item that does something to Socketed Gems still needs to be interesting in a way where it's applying to 6-linked items now.
This might be way too specific of a question that is, like, you just can't answer, but since obviously there was the playable demo of Act 1, we've now seen like a chunk of Act 2, and we'll probably see more of PoE2 along the way to a beta or something eventually coming out. Is there a worry or a concern that kind of if you show too much, you're kind of spoiling the impact? Like I was pretty surprised that we saw as much as we did, to be honest.
I think I don't know how much we are going to end up showing when it comes to the later acts. I don't know if for the previous the last big beta we had, we didn't include the final act in it. It was just not even playable. And we're likely going to do that maybe even on a bigger scale this time around, because the focus is on the balance and the things. That's kind of what the beta is there for, really. You guys getting to play the new content is the other part. But again, it's a while away. We've got to finish the content before we can decide if we're going to show it to you yet. Maybe just lots of little nice teasers as we get further on in the acts.
Does anyone have any more PoE2 questions? I kind of want to stop. I want someone else to stop bullying Rory. I don't want him to end this podcast going, that Tarke guy's right dick. I don't like him anymore.
Keep stalking. Yeah. No, I had like a super general question, because you were talking about how well, everything requires thinking a lot, and yeah, when it comes to mechanics specifically, but when it comes to stuff like the Maven and the Conquerors, those big kind of once a year mechanics, are they generally designed with the idea of this is supposed to stick around for a year, or is it trying to stick around for as long as possible and then
It really is designed to, but what is the coolest thing we can do for the map system right now? What is the coolest thing for the end game? And afterwards we decide how it fits into other stuff. And it really is make it for what it is right now, because we can't just drop it all entirely to have it disappear if we're not happy with it in a year's time.
Okay, so like an extended league cycle, except instead of a league, it's an entire end game.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, this year, how good can we make the end game? How fresh and unique are we going to make it feel?
Oh, and just to confirm, because people are asking, we can ask you questions about Harvest, correct?
I mean, actually, when we were setting this up, Rory said we're gonna have to talk about Harvest. So it's been more.
Yeah, that was my only question about Harvest.
Than him avoiding
that was it.
We're just, like, okay, like legitimately, we're just not. We just saw PoE2 and like the next league, and all. We're excited. We're excited about the new stuff. I don't want to talk about Harvest. I just this isn't on Rory. This is on us. We don't want to talk about that more. We want to talk about Path of Exile too. That is way more interesting. But yes,
that was my only Harvest related question. It's just to confirm that Chad has a clear perspective. I'm with Octavian, yeah.
Fine. I'll go back to being the horrible person. So this is my this is my like one question about Harvest. What was the intent behind bringing it back at such a high power level? Because it did seem like once it was announced that it was coming in as strong as it was, that we knew that it was like it's gonna have to get nerfed, because it was surprised, just ridiculous.
It really was that it didn't receive the attention that it deserved before, like when we were bringing it back in. A lot of it was that it was very complex to re-implement the whole thing and bring it back in. so it was a fairly tight schedule on that stuff. But yeah, it should have been receiving more attention from more developers. It's regrettable, but I mean, it's almost like having another league in terms of how it was affecting the game so differently. Yeah, but it's we've hopefully, I wouldn't say corrected the mistake, but it's different how it was, but it still has, like, there are still lots of reasons to run Harvest. Like, there's plenty of unique rewards there, so it fits in with other league content and other optional content of choosing to invest in it with the Atlas trees and so on.
What we've seen, there's going to be tons of meta crafting done with Harvest still, and it's still going to be the most powerful, bringing it way beyond what anything was before Harvest even was in the game.
I mean, every league that adds a new reward or crafting system,
Sure.
but by some degree, right? So
Yeah.
it just happens to be, it was well above the curve.
Yeah.
I mean, it is also worth noting. I was very surprised to see the Essence getting buffed because I've always thought Essence is a very strong system. So like stuff like
Yeah.
that being brought up will do a lot, especially since you can still use that with Harvest. And I think that with a lot of the new things that we're seeing, like we saw some of the cool new bestiary stuff as well, like all of this impounds, it will still be really strong. Yeah.
On all these like league mechanics going forward towards PoE2, so you're kind of taking a different approach, it seems, because I asked in the past whether or not you wanted to bring up and kind of refine some of the old leagues, and it seems like you're doing it now, even though you were very apprehensive for quite a while. Because I believe you wanted a lot of content, just like adding more content to the game rather than refining. But going forward to PoE2, where everything is kind of like needs to work together, are you focused more on refining rather than adding?
We kind of had a pretty solid consensus before we did the Atlas passive trees, but now that there is this new mechanic that lets players invest heavily, and it's worth noting, though we made each individual content type less common in maps, the Atlas passives still add the same 10% or whatever it was they did before. So the Atlas passives are actually providing more than double the amount of that specific content. So that has sort of changed how we think about these things. But there's certain old content that really are, like, for example, Tormented Spirits didn't receive a reward overhaul because they didn't have a reward system behind them. There's not something that we just want to add an entirely new reward system to make Tormented Spirits more exciting or make the Seance Atlas passive a thing that you super want to focus on. It's really we're focusing on the stuff that we know has a lot of potential and is good and adds something new to the game. Either in a really interesting combat side of things or in its rewards.
Parandis
is an example of that is a thing. That was sort of a borderline thing, but the fact that it now has a bunch of new rewards and coins, it feels worth opening Parandis chests as opposed to just doing the harvest craft. That it makes it feel like a rewarding mechanic, like a ritual light. What I think of it as now.
Yeah. To be fair,
So
when
I
it comes to incursion, I think those are the brilliant mechanics that I think a lot of people are, me personally at least, was expecting for like a really long time, and I think you guys are finally doing it justice, which is great, especially considering the last incursion rework.
Well, it's good. It was actually really good to be able to have this opportunity. But we're spending the resources needed to bring everything up, even though there was a lot of them at once.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of loose ends that got tied up, basically. Like little bits and pieces here and there that felt weird on leagues and out of place that got cleaned up or chopped off or whatever.
Yeah.
Also, you can roll for trials now, and that's just beautiful.
I was about to say, why did you cave in on the labyrinth enchant? Finally,
They caved.
I mean, it's been like 5
This is
years.
correct wording here, right?
They caved in. I mean, the community pressure.
We like this time we have the resources to do it right. There's time to do these things, do these reward system things. That's the focus. So this is the best possible labyrinth enchant thing with the current version of the setup, while still keeping not giving access to every single enchant at the click of a button.
And The way it works is it gives you 3 helmet options and then like a glove option and a boot option to choose from, right? Okay, so it's still basically the same odds for boots or gloves. Those are unchanged.
In Eternal, that's how it works. The big difference there being that you can see that none of their helmet enchants are useful to you, so I might as well use this decent boots one or something like that. So,
Oh, that does make sense. Yeah.
So good.
then
Coward.
really the gloves and boots become the fallback in that particular case. So yeah.
Can't believe they came in.
I'm really looking forward to the change. One thing I will say for anyone, basically for everyone actually, is there are so many small things. I mean, I'm sure the editor had fun with just like strobing rework 50 times on the screen. I watched the announcement, I think 4 times before to prepare it, and Ziggy said you watched like 3 times. There's still stuff that I'm like, oh, I forgot about that last time. There are so many small things coming in. I definitely think it's one of those things where it's worth going back and like checking for the compilation Reddit threads and stuff to make, because there's a lot of like really big quality of life being added, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Me too. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that we did that thing for blight maps, getting quantity affecting chests. Yeah, oh yeah, that's cool.
I don't want to keep you on here forever, so I think if we do like one last round, if people want to just be like, say something or ask a question or something.
Something.
Yeah. So funny, Ziggy. Like,
No pressure, Tarke.
Sorry.
This is why it's the
Turn it
Ziggy and
around.
Chris Q&A, not the Tarke and Chris Q&A. I just have that quick wit.
So witty.
Yeah, you ask a question on the spot, Tarke. Come on.
Okay. If you were to recommend a build, Rory, for Raiz to League starters, knowing that he likes to play hardcore, he likes to be
Cremation.
quick. There isn't cremation.
And he likes Archmage.
What would you recommend him for 3.14?
I don't know. I think Divine Ire is my most fun that I've ever had with a build. I think Ignite Divine Ire. So I don't know if you've played a lot of it, but I don't know. I just find it the most fun. I don't know why, but it is
Love
the
it
most
too.
fun build I've
Satisfying.
played. So, you'll probably die, but you'll have fun while you die. So.
Well, I played Divine Ire Inquisitor a really long time ago. It was very enjoyable. Ignite too. It's nice.
Don't have to get a Stormfire for it anymore, Raiz.
That's also true.
Nice.
Raiz has a very intimate knowledge of chasing a Stormfire in SSF.
No, I don't. Nope. Totally didn't want to make a divination card for it. I go so desperate. Absolutely did not happen.
Now what you can do, Raiz, is you can choose any league-specific unique that isn't boss-specific and have that be the item that you chase for and never get, because it's in the dragon drop pool.
I was
just
so
to
happy
confirm
for that.
it's
Okay.
that's everywhere, right? It's not just from like that's just can just drop anywhere in the entire game.
We added a couple of level restrictions to ones that didn't make sense to be level items.
Okay, Headhunter.
But and I won't tell you.
Yeah. Oh.
So burn your ancient orbs on level 40 belts all you want. But
No.
yeah. So almost everyone is available at its reasonable, like the level restriction you'd expect it to have, and a couple of special ones being high level only.
Awesome.
Oh, I should
Could
know.
we potentially?
I messed up when I put Pledge of Hands on the list of ones that are dropping anywhere because I didn't realize that was boss specific. That is from one of the bosses, so my bad.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask about that because some of the items that were previously dropping from League Mechanics got put into the pool of like Legion only uniques now. Could we see a reversal on that maybe? Like the Zealot's Oath Flask and whatnot? Pledge of Hands?
Yeah, anything that only comes from certain boss content will be restricted to the boss stuff. It is only stuff that is League, like that dropped just from being in the League. That does include things like the Delve ones, because technically you're in Delve League when you're in a Delve, but those ones are included in the main pool now as well. So, yeah, there's also some Guardian and Conqueror uniques that are added to the regular pool at very high levels. Basically, because you always have a reason to do the Guardians and Conquerors to get to their in-game boss that they're dropping keys for or whatever, their uniques are now part of the very high level regular drop pool.
That's cool.
Cool.
I will say I'm very excited about Maloney's mechanism because I've had a div card like ready to make for ages, and I've always said to myself, I will never make a div card for a unique because it might get nerfed. But the two uniques I've wanted to do it for is the Incursion Trap Gloves, which are impossible to farm in SF, and Maloney's. So I'm really happy to see that. And since it was mentioned that there's going to be like some love to Incursion specific uniques and some of them getting some changes there, has there been any changes to the difficulty of actually getting like the vials to drop? Because getting the
Please.
vials and the base,
Please.
like, ugh.
Show mercy, Rory.
All the
I
solo
Add it to the
self-taught players
ZiggyD request
try
patch
it
note.
together.
I can't remember. There were so many things, so many tweaks we did to Incursion. I can't remember that specific one. Sorry.
Just
Maybe
get one of
it
the.
should be one. It makes sense.
If you just
If you
get one of
can
the
force the
Vol
rares.
keys, then that will probably give you the unique you need, because they're probably Vol uniques. So you just farm the reliquary keys for it.
There you
I
go.
mean, one thing that I would hope, and it would maybe make sense. So if the loot dropped by the Rimba is like you're getting rares based on the rooms you're doing, if the vials also follow that, that would make it a lot better. So it's like if I want the trap gloves and I'm always putting the trap room in, the trap vial is more likely to drop, if one ever did drop.
Which it never does.
Which it never does, but that would be you know, yeah.
I can't remember if that's what we did or not. I don't. Yeah. We'll see in the patch notes in a week's time. Sorry.
Okay.
Or don't.
I tried. Okay. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add? Because I gave everyone their opportunities and no one went for it.
Do you know a lot about the Betrayal Safe House changes, Rory?
Say that again. Sorry.
Do you know a lot about the Betrayal Safe House changes?
A lot. Yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering what the tier 4 rewards typically look like. I know some of the current tier 3 rewards got moved to tier 4, so I assume some of the like strongest chase stuff there.
Yeah,
But in general, what sort of stuff are we seeing?
Well, the Exalta thing with a veiled mod is now the tier 4 one, just because a veiled mod is an amazing thing to exalt onto the thing. So that's an example of a thing that had to be moved to tier 4. A lot of things are just giving 2 chests when they previously would have given 1, or 2 crafting benches. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head. I mean, things like you'll get the winged scarabs as the scarab from the tier 4 ones, rather than 2 gold ones. That sort of
Cool
stuff. So a lot of it is whatever would be a natural progression. The like timed crafting. Well, one thing worth noting: the timed crafting things now inherently have way more time on them, so you actually have a decent amount.
Nice.
Need what mods you
That's
roll.
nice.
I always do so badly.
And I think it means there's 2 of them, 2 of the longer duration ones as the tier 4 one, or maybe it is a really long duration and not a huge amount of currency. I can't remember what we did there, but that's the kind of example of the stuff that we've been doing there. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm about to release him to go home and enjoy his day. Nugi, Octavian, you done?
I mean, you like Divine Ire. Could you buff Incinerate as well? Thank you.
I don't track the logic.
That's all.
There weren't a lot of skill buffs outside of Val's skills this time round. The focus.
Yeah,
was
it's just
on
Val skills and
Just
traps.
add a
we
1
agreed.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Ice Trap and all the Val skills. Got it.
Yeah. Confirmed
Goodness,
on
right.
the official Path of Exile channel, a trap rework coming in 3.14. Rory, thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Sorry for putting you on the spot. And PoE2 is looking really cool.
Awesome. Hope you guys
Thank you, Rory.
enjoyed the league and
Thank you.
enjoyed the PoE2 reveal.
I love that. Tarke went from kicking off Chris Wilson to then allowing Rory to leave. Great job, Tarke.
God complex.
Look, I'm trying, okay?
Cut it. Cut the stream.
Got this.
Out.
Thank you, Rory.
Thanks.